Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to get started here. Bright and early at 8:30 in the morning. Hope you have your coffee. So we've assembled an award-winning panel here. And we really want to focus this session on spending time with our panel. We're going to start with a short presentation. Edem and I, we're both EPA Region 9 GAP project officers. And we'll go through that hopefully within 10 minutes. That's our goal. And then we're going to transition to our panel and have it be as interactive as possible. So please, as we're moving along through this presentation, as you're thinking about ideas about your work in GAP, if you're new to GAP, please let us know and note those questions. And hopefully we're going to have time for everyone's questions during the session. I know we only have 50 minutes, so we want to get started while we're working on some of the IT issues here with the slides. So to get us started, I think we should just do a real quick introductions to our panel here, and then we'll move into our presentation. So Lisa, would you like to start?
Good morning. My name is Lisa Gover. I'm the director for the Gila River Indian Community Department of Environmental Quality.
Good morning. I'm Candi. I am the environmental director at the Tejon Indian tribe.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rob Roy. I'm the director of the Environmental Protection Office for the La Jolla Band of Luiseño Indians.
And me. I'm sorry, I'm being a difficult child this morning. I was just trying to be nice. I'm the Nina Hapner. Good morning. My name is Nina Hapner, obviously. I work for the Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians as the Director of Environmental Planning and Natural Resources. I am Central California previous rep, and I'm an alternate. I'm the co-lead for the pesticide work group for Region 9, and I'm the vice chair for the Tribal Pesticide Program Council.
And good morning. My name is Carrie Vera. I'm with the Tule River Tribe Environmental Department, and I am the GAP work group co-lead for the RTOC. So that's why I'm here. So thank you for coming, and I want to commend everybody for being here at 8:30 in the morning, ready to talk about GAP. I mean, that all of the POs should know these names that you guys are here and ready to work and ask questions about GAP. So thanks for coming. This is a good showing.
Okay, are we about ready for the slides? Also, before we get started, I'd like to just ask our Region 9 GAP project officers to raise their hand, just so we can see who's in the room here. So also, and Edem's in. But please make sure to note, especially if you're new, this is only 50 minutes, but we're here. So we're here to talk more about the Indian Environmental General Assistance Program. And that's what we love to do as GAP project officers. So, okay, so we have a short presentation maybe, and we'll get started. Okay. I could do this off of memory maybe if you want me to do it that way.
You guys actually introduced yourselves, did you?
What's that?
Did you guys introduce yourselves?
Edem and I did. Yeah, we're. No.
I wasn't paying attention.
Okay, so this is our first slide. We do have all our email contacts here. This is the panel. So I think these presentations are going to be available after the conference here. So feel free to reach out. We're available. My name's John Herbst, JR. I go by JR. And this is Edem. And we're also Region 9 GAP project officers. And then we have a list of all our amazing panelists that are here early this morning to join us to help out with the session.
It's Nina Hapner. So somehow that got, sorry about that, Nina.
Sorry, Nina. We made a neck.
Last time I sent the correction in. So if you didn't know, obviously my last name is changed to Stewart.
Sorry, Nina.
That's how I found out. Shows you how truly entrenched I am.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, can we get the next slide? Going? Okay, maybe. Well, anyway, the next slide's an overview, which we've shared already in terms of what we plan on doing today. We wanted to start off by kind of setting the stage. I think we're trying to make this an acronym-free session. So I think throughout this week, there's been tons of acronyms out there. So we wanted to start out by going over, the overview of GAP. We want to talk about the GAP guidance, the 22 GAP guidance, which is fairly new. It's a year old now. So, and then we want to talk just real briefly about some GAP capacity building and implementation activities, things that are allowable in the GAP universe. And then Edem's going to talk about the upcoming GAP Notice of Funding Opportunity or Availability, the NOFA or NOFA, depending. And then, of course, like we mentioned before, we really want to have that interactive discussion with all of you here that have joined us, and then our folks here on the panel. So we're prepared for questions, and I'm ready for that. So next slide, please. Okay, so I think we went over this earlier, but just in case, EPA's Indian Environmental General Assistance Program, known as GAP, is intended to assist federally recognized tribes and eligible intertribal consortia to develop the capacity to manage their own environmental programs. And also, in addition to, which is key, is develop and implement solid and hazardous waste programs for tribes. An important thing to note is that GAP, this EPA program, that GAP is a non-competitive program, which is great for us because it means, like I mentioned before, we all raised our hands as GAP projects officers. We're here to help out with this program. Whereas competitive programs, sometimes there's all kinds of requirements about the competition, which most of you might know, but GAP isn't that way, so it's a non-competitive program. We want to make sure to highlight that. Okay, next slide. Here is just a quick list, and we actually looked at this slide a few days ago, and this isn't a complete list, but we do have a link below of all the EPA or statutes that are administered by EPA. So it's important to know that, as you develop a GAP program, that those activities and the work that you do, for example, the Clean Water Act, CWA, or the Clean Air Act, a lot of that work needs to be tied to one of these statutes. So we just wanted to share that real quick, quick bullet list here of all the statutes that EPA administers here. Okay, next slide. Okay, so sometimes it's like, okay, so what is capacity building? What is that? What does that mean? This slide shows, kind of a real general overview of all the things that in GAP is considered capacity building, environmental capacity building. Development of knowledge, skills, and capabilities, administrative, fiscal, and management capacity, relationships with other partners, stakeholders in the community, being here at the conference. I mean, that's an example. Development of plans, codes, ordinances, and strategies also. So it can be a broad range of things, but we just wanted to kind of go over and make sure that folks kind of had an idea, some of the general things, what capacity building would be. Okay, next slide. Really important is the 22 GAP guidance. This really sets the framework for what we can and can't do in GAP. There was a lot of work in partnership with tribes and tribal partnership organizations and groups to update the 22 GAP guidance. So if you haven't had a chance to check out the GAP guidance, this is your starting point. So, I mean, if that's the take-home message from this presentation, please download the 22 GAP guidance and review that. It really kind of sets the stage of what we can and can't do under the EPA program. And also, just real quick, thank you. We wanted to highlight there are some EPA, American Indian Environmental Office training videos specifically focused on the 22 GAP guidance. And we provided a link here, and they're also available if you do a search on Google and just put GAP guidance, and it'll show a link to these training videos. And AIO, our headquarters office, put a lot of time into putting those videos together, so highly reference those if you're getting started to go through the GAP guidance. Okay, next slide, please. Here are a few examples of GAP allowable activities from this slide, just to kind of give you, again, we defined what capacity building was, but we also wanted to share some examples. Generally, from from my work, from what I've seen over the years, usually there's an administrative component, there's a travel and training component, outreach component, and then maybe a media specific component, maybe work on an air issue, maybe work on the water, maybe solid waste. So you're not limited to how many components you could have in a work plan for the work that you do, but really it's up to the tribe and how they want to focus that work with their GAP work plan and budget. To identify that, we really wanted to highlight the ETEP, which is the EPA Tribal Environmental Plan. That's a gap requirement to develop and have an ETEP. If a tribe doesn't have an ETEP, when they apply for a gap grant, that's something that we'd be working on, trying to make sure that we have an ETEP included as work to complete. A lot of work that we're doing right now as gap project officers in Region 9 is updating ETEPs. So that's a constant thing that we're doing based off the new 22 gap guidance. So we included a link to a fact sheet too. So if you're interested, there's a quick hyperlink here for a fact sheet. Okay, next slide. And also we wanted to highlight too, real briefly, about solid and hazardous waste implementation. This slide talks about some of the things that you could do for solid and hazardous waste implementation. One important thing is the integrated solid waste management plans. That is something that really, really helps in terms of, if you want to implement using gap funds, we highly, highly recommend that ISWMP integrated solid waste management plans done and approved before we start implementing using gap funds. So, okay, next slide. And I think I'm going to turn this over to Edem.
Hi everyone, I'm Edem. I'm also a product officer in the tribal branch office, and I wanted to highlight some upcoming important events to pay attention to. Coming up in November 16th from 1:30 to 3 p.m. we'll be hosting a GAP notification of funding availability webinar. It'll be hosted by our manager Ruben Mojica Hernandez, and we'll be talking about the different requirements going into GAP and applying for GAP. And a tentative deadline right now is the applications will be due in January 26th of 2024. And we like to suggest and advise that you connect with your project officer. If you don't know who your project officer is, you can reach out to us and we can coordinate and connect you with them, and to have them be able to go through and review your work plan and budgets with you when you're applying. If you have any questions throughout the process, we'll be able to guide and support you through that and provide any technical assistance needed. And so when you're applying for the GAP cooperative agreement, and it's described as a cooperative agreement because of the involvement that we as EPA, as project officers, are included in helping you develop and build up your work plans and budgets. And there's also the PPG, which is the Performance Partnership Grant, and that's another acronym. So there are a lot of acronyms, but the Performance Partnership Grant is basically you're able to send in one application, and that one application, which includes the work plan and budget, can have multiple EPA grants included under one. So you could have different eligible programs in there. And on the next slide, we can see the types of eligible programs, anywhere from solid waste to clean water or clean air. And there's a list on there, and there's also a link in the notes of the slides that we will share with you all. And so you can choose different specific eligible programs, and you have the one work plan and budget, and you can also share some of the resources between the programs since they're all under one. And it can be a multi-year award up to 5 years. And so this allows flexibility while you're working on your projects and improving your environmental health and safety of the community you all work with. Next slide. And I wanted to quickly show an example of a GAP work plan. And the GAP work plan can come in many forms. It doesn't have to be a PDF, it can be a Word document, but it has to include some main key characteristics. So it has to have different components, which JR had talked about a little bit earlier. Some components can be like administration, travel, trainings, and they each should have some deliverables and outcomes. And that's something you can discuss with your project officer to develop these that are realistic so you don't spread yourself too thin, depending on your staff and your availability of time. And there's also, you can have some target end dates, as well as your FTE and estimated cost for each commitment under these components. Next slide. And this is also a quick example of a budget, and the budget has to cover some key components as well. It should include your personnel, the staff, and the time, as well as the salaries of the staff on there. And it should also have fringe, and fringe is just another description for some of the benefits, retirement, insurance costs that go in there. And then there's also travel, capturing what your travel will be using the budget, and also listing supplies and equipment. And equipment's usually anything that costs over $5,000. That's sort of the threshold for equipment. And there's also capturing contractual costs, construction costs, and any other costs that don't fall into any of those other categories. And there's also the IDC, which is the indirect cost rate. This is something that we can help connect you all to the Department of Interior, which can negotiate and help you determine what the indirect cost rate will be. And the IDC, or indirect cost rate, helps capture and help you prepare for costs associated with working on building your capacity. It could be electricity for the buildings you work in. It could be covering other costs for your offices and how you manage the grant. And next slide is just a quick overview of what we covered today. And if you have any questions, we're all available. We have a star-studded cast in our panel here to answer any questions. And there are also some sessions to check out if you haven't already, to continue to learn more about some of the components and some of the requirements that go into developing your work plan and budget. I believe the climate change one already occurred, so you can find the recorded session. But we have the GAP as my activity implementation, or as a capacity building, coming up after this, I believe. And it's also the GAP grant management quiz show, which will also be in this room as well. But I believe that's it for the slides. And I would like to open up the floor for questions for JR and I, and as well as our panels on their experiences developing their budgets and work plans, and also just how they go through applying through each cycle. Thank you.
I wonder if you guys could talk about the new GAP guidance and the new flexibility of putting your solid waste management plan within your ETEP, and what that does as far as, originally solid waste management plans had to be signed by the tribal council or chair. And now that gives the flexibility to the environmental program to not have to get that signature, but kind of what that means for the tribes moving forward.
Gilbert, we didn't plant that question, did we? That's great. And I think what we should do is we should follow up, because we really want to keep this kind of a GAP 101 overview. And that's a little bit more detailed for the work that we do. But if you can you give us the contact information for that tribe? And then we can follow up specifically that way. But thank you for the question, Gilbert. I think we should really try to keep this overview.
Yeah, so just really, really quick, and I want to get to our panel we keep saying that, but I just wanted to throw this out as one of the main purposes of talking to the panel is to get some interaction here. So the idea was for these are experts here that have probably, if you add up their years of experience, it's like over 50 years of experience managing GAP. And so that's why they're here. And that's supposed to be a compliment. So they're going to talk about their tips and tricks and their success stories. We're going to give them a chance to do that. And then we want to hear from you all. What's still missing? What do you still want to know about GAP based on what the EPA staff has presented and based on what our staff has talked to you about their successes? So that's really what we want to get out. So don't be embarrassed to ask questions. So I think we're going to start with Nina. Is that okay? Of course. Yeah. So, and also what I'd like them to do, now I'm afraid to ask this, but I wanted to ask them to tell you all how many years they've been working with GAP, because I want to set the stage that they have a lot to share and their success stories. And that's really what we want, everybody to be successful in GAP. And hearing testimony from tribes or even getting mentorship from tribes is something that we really want to nurture and make happen. So if you don't mind, what tribe you work for and how long you've been working with GAP, each panelist, that would be great. We'll start with Nina.
Okay, so I really wanted to show two slides. And some of you, if you were at the conference last year and came to my presentation on GAP capacity building, this is from that presentation. But this was put together from my perspective of what GAP is for me and how it's worked with my program. And they touched on this. It's, you're adding departments, you're adding programs to build your department so you can build your programs, right? It's partly what you're doing. And then how do you do that? Sometimes it's just your butt in the seat that starts that process, because for years we struggled. Like, how do you define, how do you quantify how we built gap? Like, how have we shown, we could show in other divisions for solid waste or air, but it was difficult to quantify to show how important gap was. And sometimes being on that phone, somebody calls and they have somebody to talk to. That is a huge step for a tribe when you put that program in place, because now you're starting the process. And then, and we started with a general assistance grant, and it's meant if you don't have your ordinances or you have to update your ordinances, that's what this does. It can help you do that. And he mentioned solid waste plans, emergency plans, education material. That's all. And start easy. Don't like, oh my God, all this stuff to do. Pick a few things. And as JR, thank you. I'm sorry. I only ever seen him on video, this first time in person. When they said, you can choose as many components as you want, pick what you think you can actually do. I know this by personal experience, and anybody who's been my PO in here or knows me has to remind me of that a lot. I get really big. And then, do you know what the tribe wants? Like, take the time, because you can do that under general assistance. Talk to your council, talk to your community, even if it's one-on-one. Because I don't know, sometimes it's easy to get people to come to meetings when you bring food, but sometimes they just don't want to talk to you. So, and then sometimes you starting something and they'll tell you they don't like it. But you can be informal, and you can set up a needs assessment. As I said, not survey, 4-letter dirty word. Don't use that word. Assessment, questionnaire, inquiry. And then, does your tribe have a strategic plan? So that's where some people don't like the ETEP, and it's not something I think I should have to have signed off by EPA, but internally for me, it does help me look at what I need to accomplish and what I have going on in the department. Because your ETEP does not just have to have general assistance program things in it. Put your air, put your water, put things that the tribe's working on environmentally. It doesn't say that you're going to be doing it with general assistance program funds, but at least you know where they're going, because whatever they're doing, if they're acquiring land, they might get it into trust, and then all of a sudden you might have to reevaluate and redo ordinances and everything. So think on that. I would say think big. Let me go to the next one. All right. If you guys have not seen this, hopefully it plays. Sometimes I feel like when I talk to government entities, including EPA, it sounds like this. Is there sound? Oh, no sound. Oh, can we get sound? Is there any sound? If we don't get the sound, then I definitely recommend you look this up on YouTube. Yes, it is Ma and Pa Kettle. And this is the scene. Okay, so this was beyond me, but but these were reruns. And this is about like insurance. And they're talking about all of the things in insurance, and it's like contracts. And they're like, what? And so then they're trying to do a whole number thing and how they add it up. Is it not? Oh. Yes.
Per the 2022 GAP guidance, we no longer require a signed cover page for the ETEP.
Oh, that's right.
So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, we can. If he fixes it, we'll come back to it. People ask questions. Okay. Oh. Okay.
I'll read it to you. It starts out with this. Like it should start. This agreement entered into this 20th day of July, year of 1950, between Pa Kettle, party of the first part, Ma Kettle, party of the second part, and Billy Reed, Giaduck, and Crowbar, parties of the third part, fourth part, and fifth part. The aforesaid parties of the first part and second part agrees to part with part of their part, parties of the third part, fourth part, and fifth part. It is also agreed that all parties are to do their part to keep the agreement made between the parties of the first part, second part, third part, fourth part, and fifth part. That's only the agreement in part. You got those parts there like an automobile, have some left over. Yeah. Should the first party and second party become a party to anything not agreeable to the third party, fourth party, and fifth party, the first party and second party shall be liable to the third party, the fourth party, and the fifth party.
Hold on, Billy. That's enough. I've had too many parties already.
Of course, that's just a rough draft.
When you get it smoothed out, you won't understand it better.
Now, about the percentage. I figure 75% to you, Bob, and 25% divided between the five of us. Gila, Gover, myself, Tom, and the baby. That makes 5% for each one of us.
Billy, you're cheating yourself. If there's 25% divided among the five of you, that's 14% apiece.
Oh, no, listen, Bob. I wouldn't cheat you, you know I wouldn't. Now, look here. I'll show you. Let me rub this out here. And now, 25 divided by 5 is 5. You see, 5 won't go into 2, will it? No. But 5 goes into 25 5 times. See?
You're wrong, Billy. Now, I'm a pretty good mathematician. Now, 5 into 25. 5 won't go into 2.
No.
But 5 goes into 5 once. Now, we didn't use the 2 before, so it brings down 10. Now, 5 into 20 goes 4 times. There you are. 5 into 25, 14.
No, look, Bob. Let me prove it to you. Now, my modification. 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25.
I'm surprised you're learning. I'm surprised that you're learning. Now show me. 5 times 14 is 25. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 1 is 5.
Okay.
That's it.
No, look, Bob.
So we can stop it there and you guys can watch it. But sometimes I feel like even as long as I've been dealing with general assistance and other government entities, I feel like that's how my conversation goes. And so if any of you have ever felt like that, it's okay. You're on the right path. You'll get it worked out. So don't despair. Keep on trucking. And yeah. And the reason I think about this is when we used to have to do cost shares with clean water and we were trying to figure out how to pull ID, like how do you pull that? How do you get your 5% and what's the best way to do it? And sometimes I felt like the conversations were like this. And I'm like talking to EPA, the fiscal name totally went out. Thank you, grants management. They would be like, no, you do it like this. I'm like, but I can get that doing it like this. No, you don't do it like that. But I'm like, I can get the same thing. It is just, so don't worry. Anyway, just a little lighted humor, but how see capacity building for tribes, just you being in the seat, even if you're new, take it easy, take it slow, and set out your priorities. Like I said, the first thing they're gonna have you do is do your ETEPs if you don't have them or update them. And it's a really good place to start because internally it will help guide you.
All right, sorry, we're kind of running short on time. So I want to go to the next. So Rob, basically, I don't know if you need me to lead in with questions, but basically what we're hoping to hear from you guys is you're obviously where you feel you've been successful in GAP. And then it would be really great if you added something that you feel like you still don't quite know with the new guidance, that's something that's still a little bit confusing. Because I think if you guys have that, everybody else has it too. So thanks.
Sure thing, Carrie, but I'm also going to be a slight bit of a pain in the butt. I really want, the whole purpose of this was for the audience to be able to ask questions. So I know we threw it out earlier. Weren't really any questions, but we've had several more people come in the room right now. So I'd like to ask, anybody in the audience have questions? Is anybody new out there? Any questions from people? Yes. Saw a hand start to go up over there. Can somebody, Carrie, can you take that wonderful lady a mic? In the middle on that side.
Hello. I really appreciated that, Nina, because that was really helpful, your slide. And that is how I feel. I'm pretty new. So, but my question is, when you get all of those programs under one, you do have to still do separate reporting for each, right? And apply for like error and all of those.
So when you're saying all under one, you mean like under a performance partnership grant?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the things that people don't always, when EPA says it'll reduce the reporting burden, you only have to submit one report, but it does still need to include all the programs that are in your PPG. And when you do first apply for the programs, you do apply for them individually. So let's say you're applying for GAP, Clean Water 106, and Clean 319. Let's say you have those 3 programs. You do need to put together a separate work plan and budget for each of those, and you do submit those to EPA separately. But then if you want to combine those together into a performance partnership grant, you will do that. You will merge all those together, and then you'll submit to grants.gov one final application in grants.gov, which that is really helpful. I mean, grants.gov can be a little bit of a pain. Actually, I like grants.gov, so I'm probably weird. And then the reporting, you only need to submit one report, but it does need to include all of those components. But let me tell you why I really love PPGs. One, if you, it can greatly reduce your cost share that's required. If you have programs, GAP doesn't require a cost share, right? But some of the other programs like 106 and 319 do require a cost share. But if you put them into a performance partnership grant, doesn't it goes down to 5%? Isn't that correct? Or actually, I'm sorry, it is now 0. It is now 0. And so if your tribe is kind of struggling to, to match your federal grants, which, you can generally do with indirect, with not indirect costs, but thank you. Rather than cash match, you can do it with like in kind. That's what I was looking for. You can do it with time for like your finance office, your tribal leadership, other things like that. But if you're struggling for that, it takes it down to 0. So I love performance partnership grants. I think they're really, really helpful. What was the other thing I was going to say about performance partnership grants, PPGs, is one of the great things is that normally if you have individual standalone programs, you can't move money between your 106, your 319, your GAP. But if you have one program, it's one program. So remember that. You bring those different grants into a performance partnership grant, you have one grant. That money can be then shifted around and moved around. That's one of the great advantages. Also, there was some talk about indirect costs. So if we have, people who are brand new and you don't know what your indirect cost rate is, you shouldn't be the ones that are developing your indirect cost rate for your tribe. You should have, hopefully you have a finance department that is handling that. So.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answered the question. It wasn't too long.
It did. It was perfect.
What other questions do we have? I know it's early in the morning, but okay, yeah, back in the back. I don't want to take this over from anybody else. I just want people to ask questions, but I know.
So when you speak of moving money around within the grants, the entirety, the PPG, now is there a certain percentage or amount that you can move from grant to grant, or?
Yeah, without approval. So you can, and not necessarily, unless you're moving from one component that you have money into another. But a lot of that conversation just needs to happen with your PO. So you just talk to your PO and let them know what you need to do, and they approve it. Because even though you have separate work plans for each of those, you know what you need. And sometimes those people are working back and forth, but it's a conversation with your project officer. But let's say you needed to move. Let's say you had some money for contractual and you're not using it, but you want to put it in your personnel and it's more than 10%, then you need to get an approval. But if it's less than that, you don't. But it's always a good idea to have a conversation with your project officer on what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to pass this on. Oh,
no.
And so Candi, I know that Candi is fairly new to GAP.
You need a mic too, because people online can't hear you.
Oh. I'll stand up to everything. Candi's fairly new, but she was gracious enough to come and talk about her as a new GAP officer, what's been helpful to her, and then what is still lacking.
Yeah, so I came in, I'm a new GAP environmental director, and I came in at the end of June. And so I'm representing the new directors. What really helped me was when I came on, my PO, JR, he was in the process of doing a bunch of grants. So I wasn't able to speak with him. I felt like I was on an island all alone. And so I was basically thrown into this position, and he gave me the 7 modules to look at from IEO, and I looked at the guidance book that they have. And so I was able to, when I watched the 7 modules, it was like, I'm so green to it. So it was like jargon to me. So I had to go, I referenced the guidebook, and I was able to replay the modules and look at the acronyms, because there's a glossary in the back with a bunch of acronyms. So I was able to just to kind of reference each, and that really helped me a lot into knowing what GAP was. After that, after I was able to speak with him, my stress kind of came down. I was able to do my Q3 reporting, and I've been able to work with, within my next this next reporting, I'm able to be more familiar with GAP, which really helped me out. But I did mention to him, being alone, I'm the only one in my environmental department at Tejon, and he was my only person that I was able to talk to regarding GAP. It would be really nice for the project officers to kind of maybe do like a mentorship program, being able to speak with one of the, a seasoned GAP, someone that's been working in GAP for a while, and having that link at the beginning would have really helped me out, because like I said, he was doing other things. He was finalizing grants, and I was kind of just like, what am I doing? So it would have been really nice to speak to a Rob or a Nina or a Lisa, just to have those kind of questions. And also because they're in my region, when I go to my first R Talk, I have that networking and that peer-to-peer match. So still learning, but yeah, that's kind of what helped me get to know the GAP program.
There's just a few things I wanted to know. The first one is that we had a demonstration today that our GAP officers may not know how to judge time well. So when they're when they say 10 minutes, they mean 20. And so when you're haggling over FTEs, remember that. I couldn't help it. You guys just rolled right under the bus, and there I was. The other thing is, I think you need to know from your communities, your leadership, and the people in your department, what is it that the tribe needs, and go with that. Start there. And if you don't know, ask, what do they need? What service can you provide to the community that you're working for? Number 3, the thing I like about PPGs, semi-annual reports, not quarterly reports. I don't know if that's true for a GAP PPG. But the thing is that if you don't want to do all that reporting, check with your project officer and say, hey, I want to go to semi-annual or annual. I asked, never got an okay, but I asked, and I asked, and I asked, and I understand that they're talking about that now with less reporting for GAP, because you know how long it takes to report. There was a 4th thing. Don't overpromise. That's kind of when new people come on, Candi, you overpromise. You're only going to get a certain amount of money. So when you put your budget together, ask for what you need. When they come back and said, this is all you're going to get, make your work plan match what they're going to give you. Thanks.
I want to build on that, not overpromising. So that's what I did for many years. Many years did this. Don't know why, but I did. There are certain things that you cannot control. Let's say I would put in that I wanted to draft a solid waste ordinance, let's say. Well, I would put in all the steps. My component is complete a solid waste ordinance. And then all my commitments are the steps that I would go along to actually write that ordinance. And I would put the last one be that we would take it to the general council, because at La Jolla, it's a general council driven tribe. Tribal leadership does not pass an ordinance, the population, the membership of the tribe does. So I would put in my work plan that I would take this to the people and the people would pass it. I have no control over that. Quickly learned that I was shooting myself in the foot by putting commitments in my work plan that I had no control over and could not accomplish on my own. So that is one of the things I would highly recommend to you. Only put things in your work plan that you can control. And the other thing that, Candi is talking about, coming in and being a department of one and being on her own. She had some assistance from JR, but I think she's also looking maybe from assistance from colleagues. So something that we do in Southern California each year is we get together through our SoCal RTalk group, and we come together and we have an all-day meeting where we talk about GAP work plans. And oftentimes I think people are very hesitant to share the work plans. No, this is my work plan. I don't want to show it to you. I don't want to show you my budget. I don't want you to know how much money I'm getting. Some people will never want to build that bridge and get over it. That's fine. But other people might be more willing to share. I am willing to share. And so in Southern California, what we do is the people that are willing to share, we'll put our work plans right up on the screen in front of everybody and let everybody see it. If you have certain things you want to, hide, you want to hide your salary, well, okay, do that. But we get together and we share our work plans and we strategize and we learn from each other. So I would really recommend that within the different regions, the different geographic areas, that talk to your colleagues, talk to your RTalk reps. If you don't do this and you need some assistance, reach out to those around you. Don't try to go it alone. So that's something that's really, really helpful, that I would really recommend.
We got 5 minutes, so great. No, that was, thank you, everyone. And I'm sorry that we were short on time. But I wanted to throw it back out to the audience and say, based on what you saw with EPA's presentation and these great words, is there anything, we want to hear from you, what other kind of training or outreach that you would like to see with GAP, specifically training, because we're really wanting to work with EPA to develop training on GAP, especially with the new guidance that would be helpful to tribes. So if you have something that you would like to see more of, probably everything, but if there's anything specific, we would love to hear it right now. And I have Candi as incentive. Okay, there's a chat question.
Are there any meetings that are set up in our regions to talk with other colleagues, give ideas, ask questions, bounce off ideas? This could be monthly, maybe.
There are several opportunities. One is Carrie's work group on GAP, but we have a lot of Region 9 RTalk support groups. I like to call them work groups.
Okay, any other? There we go. Coming.
What I'd like to know is, so training on transitioning. We got a lot of new people here. We got a lot of new faces, and they're transitioning into people that are retiring or people that have been there for a while. So their work plans are like really in depth, or they're up in the more mature. And then you have new people coming in and having to fill those shoes. So a training on negotiating going down, because with the ETEP, there are steps that you kind of, a ladder that you take. And when you have a new person in, that ladder goes all the way back down practically. So a training on how to negotiate transitioning into a new person, into a very mature GAP work plan. Because and I forgot your name, Candi. So Candi is transitioning into Stephanie, who was an RTalk rep who knew her program and who's now not there. And so she stepped into a mature program. How do the new people here start to transition? And the other training that I think would be important would be how to not necessarily negotiate your work plan, how to start creating a work plan based on your knowledge and moving it forward. If we just took a raise of hands, how many here are under 2 years old in GAP? How many here are between 3 and 6? How many have 7+ years? How many have 40? No, I'm just joking up front. But what you can see is that we have 50% of these are under 2 years old. So when we're talking about Gap 101, the people that are up front there barring Candi, and that's no shade on you, Candi, those are the people you want to talk to. If you are within Southern California, if you are within Central California, Nina over there too, if you're within Northern, if you're within Nevada, if you're within Arizona, you need to be contacting your RTOC reps because they can get you a mentor. Manny says, don't call him.
Good morning, Manny from Auction Indian Community. I have been with the tribe going on 18 years. And in the 18 years that I've been there, I really didn't know what FTUEs were and how it was put together because our director, manager, so on, would never share that with us. We got new management. And so now they're sharing that all with us. And like you all that are 2 years, I'm kind of right there with you because of the training or not knowing of how those things were put together. We recently had a training with one of our project officers, and she showed us a lot. She opened her eyes on how it works, you get your hours, how you get your 0.05 or whatever it is, because I didn't know about that. So definitely, like what Roy said, if you're willing to share it, then by all means, why reinvent the wheel? Because if the wheel's working, we might as well use it.
So that's awesome, Manny. And so something that I was taught many years ago, I've done management for, this is going to sound kind of scary. I've done management for about 35 years in different jobs. And one thing that I learned really early on in my management career is to, okay, no, I forgot my train of thought. Oh, yeah, that's a little bit of the age, but that's, oh gosh. So we're just about out of time here, but okay, no, that's what it is that you should always, so Candi is a department of one. Can she train up other people to understand her job? No, she's a department of one, but maybe she can. Maybe there are other people within other departments at the tribe that she can teach a little bit more about the environmental department. So myself, I always want to have somebody ready to take my job. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow or I retire or whatever it is, somebody else should be able to step into my role. So please, those of you who are in departments where you have more than one or you have that capacity, please work to train somebody else. Teach people what you're doing. Share your job with other people so that somebody else can take over from you. Because when somebody leaves and you lose all that capacity, and like Mia was talking about going back to the very lowest rung in step one, no offense, but you shouldn't, that is not a good way to run a department. You really should try to have, additional institutional capacity, additional institutional knowledge within your tribe, within your department, within your multiple departments on what you're doing so that somebody else can take over from you. So that's a strong recommendation. So I know that we are out of time. So really a recommendation here for GAP 101 needs to be at least a 2-hour session. We should not do a 1-hour session for a GAP 101. But as was being said, as I said earlier, sorry, I'm standing up and taking the mic here. But those of you, I wanted to do that poll that that I think it was, I can't remember if it was me or Danny did, but kind of asking people to raise your hand. So those of you that raised your hand in your 1 or 2 years, but you saw other people raise their hands when they had 5 years or more, I hope you were looking and seeing if that person was in your region. If you don't know if they're within your region, I'm an RTOC rep. Nina's an RTOC rep. Mia's an RTOC rep. Find out who your RTOC reps are. Ask your GAP project officer. If you don't know who your RTOC reps are, reach out to those people. Do not go it alone. Being alone is so hard. You don't need to be alone. We are all here to help and share each other. We are stronger together. And that's how tribes have survived for all these years, is working together.
So, well, because it made me think about this not being, so in the past, if you, in your program, and certainly if you only have a couple of people, but if you're struggling with your council to understand what general assistance program can do for you, in the past, our project officers have offered to come to a tribal council meeting or to take time to talk to them about what that program is. And I don't think that's off the table. I just don't know if many people have done that. And if that's the case, ask them to come and provide that one-on-one with them with the granting agency, because sometimes that's very helpful and councils do appreciate that.
Yep. Thank you guys so much. I love the mentorship idea. I hope that continues to grow. And just so you all know, this was 2 sessions squished into one. And I'm very grateful for the EPA staff that allowed us to come in. We asked for this to be 1 session on its own, the panel only, and we were denied at the conference. So I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but I hope that everybody realizes this is something that is needed and we need to continue. We intend to continue that. So thank you so much. This was really cool. And there's Candi here. If you guys want some.
Call anybody. Don't just rely on the people in your
pass it out.
region.
Thank you, panel.